It's Wednesday, October 17. This is the news on PBCJ. I am Simone Absalom. Prime Minister Andrew Holness says his administration is now laying the groundwork to roll out its signature anti-crime measure, the Zone of Special Operations, in at least 20 crime hotspot communities across the island. Mr. Holness said already the Finance Ministry is working on the budgetary allocations that will be required to sustain the measures, while the security forces undertake a major recruitment drive.
To execute the operation of which I speak, which is this parallel strategy supported by an institution, it takes serious planning. It means that you have to increase your recruitment both in the army and in the police. We have to make budgetary allocations. So the Minister of Finance already knows what the outlay will be and how that will have to be programmed. So yes, there are more zones coming, right? So it's not the intention to just rely on SOEs. There are more zones coming, but because the engagement is not short term, they have to be planned properly. And we don't want to go and implement a ZOZO that is not adequately funded, where we know where we're going with it, and adequately resourced in terms of manpower. So that is coming.
To ensure the effectiveness of the impending ZOZOs, the Prime Minister said his administration is now studying the two operations that have been declared in Mount Salem St. James and in the West Kingston community of Denham Town.
The two zones that we have are what we would call now the test cases. We have had a year and some months to study them, to see the shortfalls, to see what legislative changes need to be made, and yes, to answer the questions that the member from Southeast St. Andrew has raised. Why not more ZOZOs instead of SOEs?
The announcement came as lawmakers on both sides voted in the House of Representatives Tuesday to extend the state of public emergency in St. James and the Zone of Special Operations in the community of Mount Salem to January next year. Prime Minister Andrew Holness said the present pace of Jamaica's target of achieving 30% of its energy from renewables could be achieved by 2020 if the country remains on track in diversifying its energy use. He also announced that Jamaica will officially increase its target of use of renewable energy to 50%. The previous target of 30% renewables was set as a policy by Cabinet. However, speaking at the handing over ceremony at installed solar panels at the office of the Prime Minister on October 16, Prime Minister Andrew Holness said the previous target of 30% renewables to Jamaica's energy mix was not ambitious enough.
I have given directions that we should work even harder to a more ambitious target, to reach 50% of our electricity generation being from renewables by 2030. I think that is doable. But it is not just the competitive spirit in me that is pushing that. There is a certain reality that we have to pay attention to. And while others may say, you know, yes, climate changes, summer, spring, winter, fall. But for us, it is not just a seasonal change. For us, climate change is an existential threat.
He called on all Jamaicans, including government agencies, to remain committed to using renewables.
So it behooves governments, especially governments of small island developing states, to bring their population along, bring them into the conversation about climate change, to explain to them what is happening, but to also take the proactive steps in ensuring that we can recover from climate change disasters. In other words, we have to take the steps, not just so that we adopt, not just so that we can adapt good technology, but that we are resilient, that we can recover and survive. And a part of that is what we do with our energy mix.
Local Government Minister Desmond McKenzie says the administration has now identified an area to relocate 22 families living on the retirement landfill in St. James. In July, the National Solid Waste Management Authority, the NSWMA, began negotiations with the government entity to secure lands to assist in the relocation of people living on the landfill. This followed two major fires at the facility, which the government said it spent more than $12 million to extinguish. The minister also announced that the Social Development Commission will be carrying out a survey of the persons living on the retirement landfill in St. James to assist in their relocation. He was speaking at the handing over of 3 garbage trucks to the NSWMA by the government this week. In regional news, in the wake of last week's release of the IPCC's 1.5 report, Dean of the Faculty of Science and Technology at the University of the West Indies, Mona, and a lead author to the report, Professor Michael Taylor, says scientists from the region have been preaching for years that 1.5 degrees Celsius should be the target temperature increase in the race to dial down the projected negative impacts of climate change. The report, the latest in a series from the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, reveals that the planet, particularly small island states, will reach 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels as early as 2030. Compared to 2 degrees Celsius, 1.5 degrees Celsius would mean lower water stress, less intense rainfall during tropical cyclones, and less exposure to irreversible sea level rise. At 1.5 degrees Celsius, some coral reefs will be able to adapt, while at 2 degrees Celsius, their chances of survival are next to none. And the fisheries and the livelihoods that depend on them will be irrevocably damaged. The position, framed with the tagline 1.5 to stay alive, was the basis of the negotiating arguments with Caribbean governments tabled at the Climate Change Conference in Paris back in 2016. Taylor argued that, quote, to keep warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius requires significant global transformation in energy, transport, etc., end quote. In sports, we are on the courts with netball as Jamaica's Sunshine Girls beat England 58-43 to complete a clean 3-0 sweep in their test series at the 2018 Lasco Netball Series inside the National Indoor Sports Centre on Monday. Ranked 4th in the world, the Sunshine Girls completely dominated their English rivals, who are the current Commonwealth Games champions and who are ranked number 3 in the world. Jamaica had previously beaten Trinidad 2-0 just ahead of facing England. The gold shooter Janelle Fowler led the scoring for Jamaica, netting 42 goals in 46 attempts. For England, substitute goal shooter Georgina Fisher scored 24 goals from 28 attempts. Jamaica's coach, Marvet Anderson, said she was very pleased with the overall performance from the players throughout both series. She's quoted saying, "I'm really feeling happy as the win was also convincing," end quote. And that's the news. Thanks so much for making it PBCJ. Remember, we are the People's Station.